I have been doing winter field day in some form or fashion since 2001. 4 years of events operating in the cold by myself, practicing some form of emergency communications. Each year has provided a new learning experience of some type. The first year was an event to test just how simple of a station I could operate as QRP. QRP in amateur radio means the radio will output 5 watts or less. This is much less power than a single light bulb in your home. During that first event, I decided to use a grain bin for an antenna, and surprisingly it worked pretty decent. I was able to contact other stations from the East Coast, Midwest, South, and up into Canada. Learning experiences from that first event were that lead-acid batteries aren't too good in below freezing weather. Solar panels don't make much power in cloudy conditions with snow blowing around. Using a 100-watt capable radio as a 5-watt radio is very inefficient, and having a well thought out contingency plan for power and shelter is much more important in extreme cold conditions. As the next few years of events came and went, I continually tried to improve my station in one way or another. I focused on antenna efficiency and power consumption efficiency the first year, making the power I had available to me to go further. The first year was a rude awakening to the importance of low power consumption during alternative power. If you run out of power, you cannot communicate when it is most critical. The IC705 was a perfect addition to replace my IC7100. The second year I also ran an antenna that I made from scrap speaker wire I found around my basement. For 2025 I was wanting to do something with others, but finding the right crew to do a field day with can be challenging, especially in the winter months when the threat of below zero temperatures, snow, frozen ground, and high winds all combine to really narrow the operators down to the ambitious or clueless. I had been sending out feelers for several groups which I am involved with, but had not found any takers on winter field day operations. One group I am in, which I was invited to last year, was showing some interest, and a few of us had done solo operations for winter field day in the past. Midwest Hammers proved to be a match for me, and we started some informal talks about what our winter field day might involve, who might be there, and what equipment we had that we could bring to build a station for all of us. Kenny, KD9VLZ, was the lead organizer. He had a hot tent, radios, heaters, fiberglass mast, antenna, and a location from which he had operated winter field day with his son last year. So the plan was created that the Midwest Hammers would operate from Argyle State Park near Colchester, Illinois. Ed W9US had a laptop, spider beam 40-foot fiberglass mast, coax, and a few other goods. Chris, NR9Q, was able to provide a generator, coax, and miscellaneous items. I had a radio, coax stub filters, battery, solar panels, and 2 spider beam masts, one 40-foot to match Ed's, and one 60-foot for heavy lifting. Doug, KW9Q, was able to pick up the W9AWE club band filters, which was a huge help. Creating a station of this size with 3 operating positions, only using alternative power, heat, food, and sleeping arrangement in winter, with all the normal technical issues of a multi-op station, have to be contemplated, or the foreseeable issues that arise create large problems in actual operation of the station. Discussions about antenna came about, and with less than a week until the operation, I came up with a plan, spurred on by one of my friends, Bill, WA0JCO. I was discussing phased vertical antennas with him, and like the book of knowledge Bill is, he said, "You know, there's an easier way to do that," and proceeded to draw out plans for a half-square antenna. Perfect. Several of us in this group had been looking at this antenna and bobtail curtains, but none of us had actually built one. That evening I began making a model of a 40-meter half square, and everything seemed to be working out as planned. I then scaled the same model for 20 meters and 10 meters, and each worked as described in the antenna plans I could find. I decided if one antenna was good, that 3 antennas nested in close proximity to each other would be better. This is usually where my ambitions meet reality and things can get complicated. Modeling this antenna setup, I found a few issues to work around, but if the antenna didn't all share the same feed line, according to the modeling software, things would work out. I was still very nervous to build these antennas at the event and test them mere hours before actually using them. That timeline left little time for alternative plans, but we did arrange for backup antennas on site in case this plan was a big flop. It took Ed and I 3 hours to lay out, connect, and erect 3 half squares. Kenny had to assist us for the final raising of the mast due to winds that were high at 20 plus miles per hour, and the amount of coax, paracord, and wire we had strung across the ground and up in the air. The first attempt was abandoned, as the 40-foot spider beam pole was just not strong enough to hold the end of the half squares with the coax and chokes. The 60-foot mast was substituted in hopes that it was strong enough. Once the poles were set, there were some minor tweaks to make so that the antennas were level and square with each other and the ground. All the antennas were resonant below the bands they were created for, but that was planned, and Ed and I started to run the Rig Expert analyzer on each one while we shortened the vertical legs close to the desired length. I had created them slightly long on purpose, but had created the horizontal tops to the desired length, as they are the phasing segment between the vertical legs. Getting the antenna level, even, and pulling the coax away from them was an important detail to get the match correct. Very low 1.0-ish SWR readings were obtainable with all those details taken care of. At the end of our setup time frame, the sun was gone, and we were done for the evening. The tent was up, and 4 of our eventual 5 antennas were up in the air. We had planned for 6, but that detail comes later. Saturday morning and the 10 a.m. start time would come quickly, and we still had a lot to do. Arrival time Saturday morning for Kenny was about 8 a.m., and Ed and I were close behind, arriving near 8:30 a.m. Kenny had the cooking equipment set up, and we were all busy. I had to finish tuning the half squares and needed assistance from Ed to erect our second 80-meter infed half wave on his 40-foot mast. At this point, I forgot we also needed a 40-meter infed half wave setup on that mast, but our time was running out. I was the planned network coordinator for N3FJP Winterfield Day Log, and we were using my phone for the Wi-Fi network between our logging computers. This had been tested at my own house with 3 computers and worked fine. Setup was pretty easy, and Kenny and I got his PC linked to mine, and he had the shared log up and running quickly so he could start operating. It was already after 10 a.m. Ed finished up the 80-meter infed half-wave installation, and I worked on running the coax from all the half squares and the 80-meter infed half-wave into the tent, while Kenny started working 20 meters on his own 80-meter infed half-wave. That was a great performer. Kenny's antenna was up about 40 feet and completely horizontal. We had assigned one station to 40 meters, one to 20 meters, and I had the cleanup station for 10 meters and 15 meters during the day, and 80 meters and 160 meters during the night hours. Doug, KW9Q, brought out the W9 WAE club band filters and operated a radio on Saturday morning. Dave, KB9FIN, came on Saturday afternoon to run a radio and to give the long-haul operators a break to eat. We had a good time visiting with all of them. Several of us had other things going on during the weekend and were able to go in and out of the campground while the Winterfield Day operation continued. Chris, in our 9Q, was able to join us Saturday evening while Ed had to leave for other events. Chris, Kenny, and I operated until about 1 a.m. when we decided to call it a night. While the daytime temperatures had been really nice in the 40s and sunshine, the evening had turned rather cold, and the north wind was whipping by the tent after sundown. I found myself at 1 a.m., having not planned real well for the cold, when one of our portable heaters turned off soon after we turned in for the evening. I had a good heavy blanket and layers of clothing that were working fairly well, but I had also brought along a 12-volt car seat heater that saved me from having to retreat to the truck and running the gas engine for heat. I turned the 36-watt heater on at 1 a.m., not knowing if my 50 amp hour battery that had been running my IC 7100 for 14 hours would make it through the night in the cold temperatures, or be dead and me with no supportive heat. I woke up at 3 a.m. with Kenny wrestling around and getting the heaters back online, and that was helpful. I thought I would probably be able to make it until 5 a.m. when I could get my breakfast, coffee, and warm up. I woke up again at 4 a.m., cold, and realizing I only had about 45 minutes left before I would leave, take my battery, which was still creating heat for me, and charge it in the truck while getting my breakfast. This worked pretty well, other than the fact that fumbling around in the dark of the truck trying to insert a cigarette lighter plug into the truck outlet, I somehow managed to touch the positive and negative parts of the plug to the outer ring of the power outlet and blow the fuse to the battery. There were no replacement fuses to be found. This battery is double fused, one on each lead, so I replaced the blown fuse with a piece of wire I cut off some antenna wire I brought for emergency use. It worked fine, and charging commenced. Coffee never felt so good, and I sat in the truck warming up and reading some of the Facebook posts of other winter field day participants. Day 2 of operations were starting soon, and I returned to camp at about 6 a.m., with Kenny and Chris waking up just before my arrival. All heaters were full steam, and the tent was feeling better than when I left, likely because I was warmer now than before breakfast. Ed returned sometime near 8 a.m., and we had a full crew for a while until Kenny had to run and take care of some daily family life. We all had times like this, and it was really nice to have enough operators to take a little break here and there while keeping the radios running most of the time. 40 and 20 meters were active, and I was waiting for 15 and 10 meters to open up. 10 meter FT8 was barely making noise when I first turned on the radio. I switched to 15 meters for a while, calling CQ and working up and down the band, working the winter field day stations that I could find. I was able to find one DX contact on 15 meters and then turned my time to 10 meters, as Europe and South America were coming in pretty good. I called CQ in the tech portion of 10 meters, and then moved up higher in the band, but really couldn't get anyone to answer me. I found a few field day stations to contact, but most of the stations on Sunday morning were all DX calling CQ-DX. I decided that I would just attempt to work these stations and be in the pileup to see if I was actually getting out. My first call, I picked up Lithuania, then Bosnia-Herzegovina, and then Austria, all of those on the first or second calls. I guess no one was wanting to answer a winter field day station because they certainly could hear me in Europe. Again, I went back calling CQ and didn't have any takers. I contacted a Canadian station in Prince Edward and scanned the bands a few more times. By then, I think all of us were ready to close up the station, tear down the antenna, pack up, and head for lunch. Kenny was a gracious host. Ed was always helping, and Chris came in and filled the night shift. I know Chris wanted to be there the entire time, but other things take precedence over playing with radios most of the time, and this was one of those times. Winter field day for me is what ARR field day in June is for most other people. I'm usually too busy with work and family on that particular weekend, and I have a really hard time making it to that event, so I really understand the struggle to make these events fit into busy schedules of life. Overall, it was a great team effort. A new start for me with a great group of guys. Some I had met, and some I had only talked to over an app on my phone. A very enjoyable experience, and one that epitomizes the spirit of amateur radio communities and how events should happen. Respect for each other, the equipment, and a great attitude of cooperation, a willingness to try new ideas, even if they become failures, and encourage each other to improve skills and learn from mistakes or shortfalls of planning. Overall, I think we did really well with accomplishing the goals we set. Event objectives that we met. Number 1, operate 100% on alternative power. Solar, battery, and propane heat. Number 2, operate away from home. Argyle State Park is 2 hours away for me. Number 3, deploy multiple antennas. We had 5 antennas. 3 of those were constructed for the first time on site. Number 4, send and receive at least one WinLink email. Multiple emails were exchanged, and we participated in the KM4ACK Winter Field Day Challenge. Number 5, operate on at least 6 different bands. We had contacts during the weekend on 7 different bands. Number 6, use multiple modes. Contacts were made on sideband, JS8 call, PSK, and WinLink. Number 7, operate 6 continuous hours during the event. Total operation time for our station was 24 hours. My personal after-action report would be the following. Knowing you don't have good winter survival gear isn't a good plan. I did have a backup plan. Half squares work, but might not be worth it on 10 to 20 meters. I think on 40 meters there are advantages to having 1 or 2 in the setup, but should be paired with a NVIS 40 meter dipole for these type of events. 20 meters and above may need some directional long wires or a hex beam. I can never sleep away from home. Not sure why. I probably slept only 3 to 4 hours on Friday and again 3 to 4 hours on Saturday. So I was up early and went to bed late both nights. WinLink nodes on 80 meters during daytime hours are always my go-to sources for success during busy band conditions. If everywhere is busy, I find a 500 Hz station and I squeeze in somewhere. The data rate will be fast enough. JS8 call for digital contacts is usually slow and a little frustrating. PSK is always faster, and I feel that some of this is because PSK users are well versed in short exchanges and contest environments. JS8 call is still my favorite MCOM mode due to being able to decode all stations and speeds at the same time. The ability to find a path to a station you can't actually hear and leave messages for them or relay a message to them is a very powerful tool when used properly. VeriChat is probably on the list, but there are some new features that I have not been able to explore that competes with JS8 call. We failed one objective that we should have completed. This was something I could have corrected, but failed to set an alarm so that I would not miss the Winter Field Day bulletin. I was sure I would not fail to do this, but I did. We could use more people or run fewer radios. We never really had time to cook or much time to sit around and talk. Setup was a bit complicated, and that was mostly my fault for being so ambitious on the antenna system. The good news is that it all worked, and the lack of setting up a 40 meter infed half wave was the one failure. Band filters were wonderful. For the most part, they forced band coordination. The one mistake was when I tried to get a WinLink connection on 40 meters while someone was on sideband. We noticed that quickly. I had flexible band filtering options, and that's what got me in trouble. When running 100-watt radios, sideband is king for contact speed if you can hold a frequency and keep a pileup going. I'm not used to that when running QRP. Overall, I had a great time. This was the best group experience I have had during field day. I greatly appreciate everyone that attended, put out a great group effort, and really made me feel welcome. Thank you.